Welcome to day 5 of our floral challenge. It's going to be short and sweet. We're using gouache just like we did yesterday, the same set of whole bean along with Naples yellow and opera pink. I'm using my same good tried and true brushes. I've got 2 detail brushes and my trusty number 8 or size 8 black velvet brush. The first thing I'm going to do is I am mixing up sort of a little bit of a pinkish coral color. And we're going to do the rose. We did these on the very first day of the challenge, so now we're just kind of circling back to some of the things that we learned on the first day to do some loose flowers, but this time instead of watercolor, we're doing them with gouache, and we're using the gouache really watered down. Now I'm putting a little bit of that darker pink in the center of the rose just to give it a little bit more interest. I'm going to take some of the white gouache, mix up a nice yellow, a pale yellow, and I'm just going to do some petal flowers. They're a little bit hard to see because they are so pale, but we will surround those with darker flowers, and that'll make or leaves, and that'll make them pop out. So I'm just doing the petal flowers. Again, we learned this on the first day. Now the difference between gouache and watercolor, we did something similar on day 1 with watercolor, is that gouache can be really opaque or it can be really transparent. So we're just trying to use that to our advantage. Some areas like the outer petals of that rose, we are making very translucent. And to do that, of course, we're just adding a lot more water to the mix. And then the center is more opaque, just less water, more paint. Also, we're going to come back in, and instead of doing the leaves with gouache, because I just don't like the color mixes that I have of my gouache for green, I'm going to use watercolor markers. So in essence, this is another mixed media. What we're doing is we're using gouache, but we're using it in a watercolor style. And then we're going to come back with watercolor markers to create the leaves. We're just doing a nice bouquet. So I did a little bit of a darker orange up there at the top. I'm just kind of trying to fill in the space. I'm thinking about the sizes and the shapes of my flowers, just like we learned on day 1. If you didn't do day 1, go back and check that out. Now I mixed up a really pale lavender. This one is a little bit more opaque than, the roses or the petal flowers. So it is a little bit thicker. It's got a lot more white. Anytime you use more white in a mix for gouache, it is going to become more opaque. You have to thin it with a ton of water to get it to be transparent. So I'm trying to balance that composition out by putting some more lavender flowers on the other side of the 2 roses and the petal flowers. Now I am mixing up sort of a goldenrod color with a little bit of the yellow, a little bit of burnt sienna, and we're going to come back to that. I decided I want some darker, almost like little violets, those little wood violets that you can see. They're really tiny. They grow low on the forest floor. I've never seen them in anyone's garden, but I've seen them out on my walks. And they have anywhere from 3 to 4 petals. So I'm just doing some darker violets, and I'm putting them right against that really pale yellow petal flower. And that's going to help bring it out just a little bit. The darkness of it, just, anytime you put a little bit of light against a little bit of dark, they complement each other. So I'm going to put a few more of those little violets down here on the other side, trying to keep my composition balanced by, it's not exactly symmetrical, but I'm trying to keep some of the same colors, the same darkness of the colors on each side of that rose. That rose is our focal point. It's going to be the first thing that you notice whenever you look at this bouquet. So I've got those in there. I've decided I'm going to mix up a little bit of a brighter, more rosier pink. I'm going to take this pink and darken up just a little bit more, and then I'm going to make sort of a cluster of flowers. It could be like little crepe myrtle flowers that you've clipped from a crepe myrtle tree. It could be phlox. It could be anything you want, but I love doing these really easy, messy sort of floral arrangements. You don't have to be precise, and you just do a lot of fun little messy marks. I like to imagine that there's a circle, a little imaginary circle, and then I just do the petals around that circle, and the petals are just little blobs. So we're just doing blob flowers, and really just using our imagination to make them into flowers more so than our brush. The brain is a wonderful thing. If you even give it a little bit of hint of what you're trying to create, your brain goes ahead and fills in the rest. So now I've lightened up that pink, and I'm going to go ahead and do some more petal flowers. We like petal flowers. I love them. I wish I had done some petal flowers with a few more petals instead of just the basic 4 petals. That got a little boring, I think, in this composition. But as I say, you never fail. You're always learning. You just pay attention to what you're doing, decide what you like, what you don't like, and you will come out of it with more knowledge for the next painting. So don't ever get frustrated if your painting doesn't turn out just like you want it. Believe me, you are constantly learning, and the best way to learn is to actually put the brush to paper with some paint. That's the best way. And I have confidence that you guys are going to do some marvelous paintings. So I'm also doing a little pink flower up there. I'm just trying to bring that brighter pink, that lighter, paler, brighter pink up there to the top too. Like I said, I'm just trying to make sure I'm balancing out the colors, balancing out the lightness and darkness of my flowers all around that composition. So now I'm coming back to that golden color I decided, and I'm trying to do some like, I want to, like golden rods, or not forsythia, but similar to forsythia. Some type of flower. You don't even have to know a name of it. You could just be making up your own flowers. But I wanted to add a little bit of that gold in there to complement the purples. And both of our pinks are leaning toward the purplish style somewhat. So I want to go ahead and put those in there because that will also complement those pinks. Going ahead and doing the centers of our petal, our yellow, our pale yellow flowers with that darker golden color. Now I'm just going to draw a bunch of stems with my marker, my watercolor marker. I'm using the brush tip. I'm also making it sort of dark around that bottom petal of that flower just to make that bottom petal stand out. I'm taking a lighter green, going in there, and I'm just adding more stems to our little bouquet. And then I'm just going to come out and just start using like some different greens. I've got several different greens picked out from my watercolor markers. And I'll have those listed for you in Patreon for you to download, a little resource sheet. And then once I do that, I'm just picking out different areas, just trying to fill in some of the areas with some leaves. And I'm doing different shapes of leaves, different colors. I'm doing a few sprays. You could even put some berries. I didn't put berries in this one, but you can do like some deeper red berries or like a deep pink berry in there if you want to give it a little bit more texture, a little bit more contrast, but that's totally up to you. And just where I'm seeing some blank spaces in between some of the flowers, I'm just going in there and doing leaf shapes here and there. And I'm also trying to work around the composition to balance it out. I don't want to get too heavy on one side with leaves and forget about the other side. So I'm constantly thinking about the composition and just trying to get it balanced out and trying to get those colors sort of sprinkled around the bouquet, those greens. I want those greens to be all over, not just on one side. Like I don't want light green just on one side of the bouquet and not on the other. So I go from side to side trying to put in some leaf shapes or some little sprays. It's completely up to you how you do this. But just making the leaves with the markers is so much easier. It also cuts down on reactivating those florals, the floral paintings. If you come back in there with some wet gouache to do the leaves, then you have the likelihood of bleeding together. So that's another advantage of doing it with these watercolor markers. And by doing it, I mean putting in leaves. Because they're not as wet as that gouache is going to be. So you have very minimal chance of anything bleeding. I'm coming in there and putting in with a darker sort of browny green, some stems in those goldenrod flowers that are connecting all those tiny little florets together. And I'm coming in with a deeper golden color just to add some shadows, give that a little bit more dimension in those flowers and just a little bit more texture. And I'm just adding a few more, in behind the other flowers, some of those darker marks, and that helps bring some of those flowers forward. I'm taking a deeper sort of rosy red, going into the center of that rose and just defining that center even more with just some strokes, just some messy line work. That's all we're doing. These are so easy. That's why I decided to stick with really easy. We didn't go off into any deep ends with some really realistic flowers. That might be a little bit much to start off with. So I'm just wanting you to get used to doing some of these really easy, sloppy, blobby flowers. And once you get your confidence with that, then you can move on to more realistic if you so choose. Now I'm taking a darker green and going over some of those leaves, just giving them some line work. Again, just adding texture and another layer of depth and color to them. And I'm just taking a darker purple and just adding a few little dots in there just to add some shadows. Now I decided I wanted to add some lime green, and that really pops out. So I'm glad I did add that lime green. I don't know, it just does a little something for me. You don't have to add it. Everything I add is optional. I want you to think of your own composition and do your own trial and error with colors that you like, or you may want to have a blue bouquet or a purple, all purple bouquet, or all yellow, or you might want to have some really bright saturated reds and blues and violets together. It's completely up to you. This is just my palette that I chose for this. And now I'm just filling in a few little cracks here and there with some green, and that way I can show off those really pale yellow flowers a little bit more by putting some green right up against them, and that makes them pop out, as you can see, a lot better. So now you can really see those little pale flowers. I might even do a little bit of yellow in the center of those pale flowers just to sort of give them a little bit more. Now I'm just doing some little orangey stamens, little dots in those pink flowers for stamens, and now I'm taking that same sort of orange and just doing some shadow line work at the center of each of those really pale yellows, and that really brings them forward too. And a few more little stamen in that other hot pink flower, and I'm just kind of looking at it, deciding if I want to do more. And I decided in some of these paler pink, I'm just taking a rose, a dusty rose, and going in these paler pink flowers and just putting some shadowing right around that center, right around where the little yellow stamens are. So let me think about this. I've decided that I want to come in here and just add more leaves. I think that would do it a lot of good. So I'm just going to add even more leaves in here, just to fill in some space and give it just a little bit more different colors here and there. So that is my whole plan. This has been a really quick one. These are easy to do. You just go with the flow. Again, you go ahead and make out your own composition and decide on your own color combination, your own color scheme. But I am just going to just get right down in here and just keep adding. I just feel like it needs more leaves. So that's what I decided to do. And I think I'm going to call this just about finished. I want to thank everyone for coming and joining the challenge. Remember, you can get your free resources over on Patreon. I'll link that below, and that is for paid and free members. So come be a free member and get the free resources for this challenge. We started off with a watercolor that was just loose florals and talking about composition and color schemes, color palettes. Then we did a nice watercolor background, and then we did an ink drawing over it and then enhanced it with more watercolor and gouache. Then we did a watercolor marker sunflower and did the background with gouache, and then we outlined it with a little bit of black ink. Then we did a watercolor background with a complete gouache floral, and today we did a gouache using the style of watercolor by watering it down, and then we did some marker leaves to go with that. So thank you for come in and join it, and I appreciate it so much. Have a great Memorial Day weekend.